Hello and welcome to the LiveOps Lounge, where we talk about all things to do with live operated games, game design, game monetization, all the things about commercial realities of creating fabulous player experiences that last. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Dominic. Dominic, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Dominic Gélineau. I'm a director of monetization and Game Economy at Grosse Morsure, a studio created with a friend. We're basically doing consultancy to pay for our in-house development. But previously, I started my career in gaming at Gameloft, where I did a vast array of different positions. I started out as a UI programmer, and then I moved on to design.
Yeah.
LiveOps, which got me started in this world. I really fell in love with free-to-play games because of that long-lasting relationship with the player. And then I moved on to economy design. But all the while, I was always interested in monetization. It's kind of a KPI for success in general. So I like achieving. So yeah. But
I love all that, but the thing I find interesting is you said, oh, I did all sorts of things, but I think there's a really nice flow in your roles, going from UI, which is, I mean, obviously, I think of UI more in the UX part of the process, but, you know, it's not just about the graphics of it. It's about understanding how the communication of an idea comes from an imagery, a purpose, a process, a flow. You know, even little things like the way in an Assassin's Creed game, we can see the little color streak on the side of something, telling us that's where we can climb, to me is part of understanding player understanding. And to go from that to design, I mean, that's just taking that into depth of play, and then to go into monetization. I mean, for me, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's the bit that, you know, the level of understanding you've got to have shared with somebody to be able to make them want to spend money.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about this later on, but like this thinking about the flow, either if it is a player flow or economy flow, or thinking about the player, UI is really at the center of that, right? Because you're making that connection between the game and the player. But yeah, and even like sometimes the lines between the different roles blur a lot. Monetization, economy design, system design, metagame, because like system design is a lot about menus in general, yeah. And menus are UI. So yeah, so it's all related. I just like, that was the next thing I was doing. It was, okay, now it's LiveOps because I like those type of games, but I'm really good with numbers and things like that. So economy makes sense, and then monetization is just on top of all of that. It's connected to every portion of the game. So.
No, completely agree. And I mean, because we met recently at the Live Service Gaming Summit in Austin. At the time of recording, that's about 2 weeks ago, a week, 2 weeks ago. And you gave a talk about kind of monetization design in particular. One thing I think that we share in kind of our view on these things is having to anchor the player into the game as part of the things that allow a player to see value. And I think, I mean, we also happen to have in common the fact we both worked at Unity back in the day, but that's another subject as well, although not at the same time. So let's explore this a little bit. So in terms of the kind of like lessons that you've gained from the fact that you've taken that journey through, what do you think is kind of, I mean, you've mentioned this love of the free-to-play experience because of its connection to player engagement. I love that. But what are the lessons you learned from thinking about it from initially kind of UX, UI, to the gameplay, to now commercial elements? What's the kind of core messages, core kind of tools that you've learned in that process?
Yeah. So coming from that side, there's this big talk about like this fight between player engagement and monetization. People would think that these two values are kind of at odds. They're fighting each other, and then you have to pick a side. But to me, they're not. They're the same thing. Well, it depends at a point. Like if you're making a game to be a piece of art and not make any money, then fully go for player engagement. That's good. But if you're making a product, if your goal is to pay your team or it's to make money or whatever, then pick monetization. And then if you're under that umbrella, you'll have to maximize player engagement if you want to maximize monetizations. At that point in time, if it's a product you're making, they're not at odds. You need to maximize both to get the bigger success.
No, I completely agree. And actually, it's one of the key things in the book I wrote recently about monetization economy design is engagement is what you need as a starting point to get retention. And again, we're talking about the free to play model. I mean, but I do think there's something in that, even in a kind of pay up front games that have like a beginning, middle, and end. If you're not retained sufficiently to get past a certain level, you're not going to get the reviews and ratings and passion for the game, which leads other people to spend the money. So I still think retention has even if it's only indirect in that context, I think it still has a kind of key part to play. But it's retention for these long-term experiences that's absolutely critical. And you don't get that retention just by piling on more spend points. They become reasons to run away rather than engage, don't they?
It's like you're grafting arms or whatever on top of something that's already dead. The core of a game needs to be fun, right? It needs to be a beating art. It needs to be, and that's the engagement part of it, right? The retention. Yeah, like you can add a calendar to something, it might improve retention, but if it's not good to start with, yes, you're going to improve 1% of nothing, basically. So you need to focus on both, right? You need to have a good core, a good gameplay that is fun, that is retaining, and then you can do good systems on top of that, but you can't do one without the other.
No, the way I'd like to. So there were some studies done back in the 60s on consumer behaviour as risk taking. A guy called R. Bauer wrote about this in Journal of Marketing in America, and he talked a lot about essentially the anticipation is the important factor here. So, we need anticipation, we need a sense of fear of missing out, and we need a sense of social capital before we start to feel like it's worth taking the risk of making a purchase. But what was interesting for me in that study is that they also talk about that there's a thing called abnegation. What abnegation means is the player or the person buying has to make a choice to step aside their other needs in order to make that choice. And I think that's a really powerful thing, a powerful counter argument to people talking about manipulation and dark patterns and stuff like that. And what I mean by that is, if we want someone to fall in love with our game, and to fall in love with the game so much that they want stuff, we've got to offer them things that they're going to look forward to. And it's going to be sufficient for them to not just look forward to, but to feel like it's okay to not do the other things they know they should be doing, like go do the washing up or play this other game or go watch Netflix with the girlfriend or the wife or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like, if you're copying something that's out there, then you're not giving something new to the player. You're not providing a good experience, and then players will already play that other copy that's already there that's probably better than your thing because they've been doing it for a long time. So I think that's what we're seeing with the market right now, that why it's so hard to make a dent in the projects that are already there and make money. It's that risk thing, but applied to companies. So companies don't want to make to risk things, so they try to be as close as possible to other products that are already there, and then they're not successful because they didn't take risk, basically. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, go figure. You do something that already exists, people are already committed to, and they already like, and you do the same thing. Why would they go for it?
Yeah, exactly.
And why?
That's the thing too, right? With the current methodology of like putting out MVPs, you're putting out there a subpar product that is not finished, and then you're competing against something that's already fully done, and your thing is not that different. Well, players are not going to move.
So I'm actually a fan of the MVP approach, but I have a slightly different take on it. It has to be viable to be an MVP. And to my mind, that means that it has to present something that is integrally compelling, or it's not an MVP. So I'm kind of agreeing with you, but I'm also saying part of the problem we're seeing is that people are calling something an MVP when they haven't actually solved a customer need.
Yeah, but also I feel like the KPIs of MVP are not the best ones usually. There's always a part of monetization in there where there shouldn't, because the thing you're trying to solve is that fun part, right? Yeah. The core, the heart that we talked about. But when the execs are looking at it, they want to see their money coming back. So there's always a portion that's tied to monetization, and it's so hard at that point.
Yeah, and I totally get it. I mean, this is a conversation we've had recently internally, and it's like this sudden click that happened for me between me and my business partner is like, so she's dealing with investors. And from an investor point of view, the thing that matters is, are you going to make the money? Because at the end of the day, their only equation is, we have some money to give to projects, but the important part of that money is that those projects, or at least a proportion of them, pay back more than we've invested. I mean, there's no shade being cast there. That's their job. That's their function. And obviously, delighted for those investors who see games as a vector for that. But we all know that games is a risky area and it's subjective. And our needs as designers are different from that. Our priorities are, like you say, find the fun, find the reason to play. And it takes a pathway. So you could argue, I mean, this is the conversation we were having, is that a metric like day one retention isn't a hard metric. Now, from our point of view, it is. They got 40% day one retention. Okay, that's a viable game. But if it hasn't got to the stage past its MVP, where it's become X percentage of conversion, it's not the hard metrics that the people at the end of the funnel need to see.
Yeah.
So does that make sense? Because I think this is the tension we're in. It's like, we need to do experiments. We need to do testing. We need to do iteration. And if we do that well, we get these great games that people don't just want to play, they want to spend money on.
Yeah, and there's another, that's the experimentation part to it. That's interesting. But the problem with the experimentation is that the cost is not clear, right? You don't know how long you'll need to experiment. You don't know. So at that point, the return becomes longer and longer the more you experiment. But yeah, like you're saying, you'll need to do that. Otherwise, you're just putting out there what's already there, and you're not going to succeed anyway. So,
but this, I think, is, to my mind, this is why I fell in love with not hyper casual games, but the way they made hyper casual games, because of the way that it forced you into thinking about data. And again, I know that's a two-edged sword too, because sometimes we just need to try things, but there's something about trying very, very early that I think is really interesting. And to your point, is working out what data points could we realistically guess at to be able to check whether this thing that I'm making has an appeal. For me, it's a bit like, I think Scott Rogers puts this into his book, what was it called? I forgot what it was called, but he talked about the triangle of weird, where you can change one thing, the world, the mechanics, or the characters, or something like that. I can't remember the three things, but the idea is that the three juxtaposed things, you can change one of them, you can't change all three. I think that resonates with me with what you were saying earlier about you going out with the same project. Well, if you're not changing one of those three, you're going out with the same project, then why would anyone want it? But if you change too many things, you lose your solid footing. So that's why, go for it.
They're lost, right? They don't know how to interact with that thing because the habit is not created, so it's not easy for them to get into. But yeah.
Precisely. And I think that's a fascinating kind of area. Sorry, you were going to say something.
I think to your point about the hyper-casual, I think the hyper-casual studios have found a way to externalize research development of fun.
Yeah.
I think all studios should have that. Like, none of them do that. I have a couple people just not trying to make money, just trying to find something that's fun and different. Hyper-casual studio have outsourced that. They're saying, okay, submit projects to us, and then we'll measure them. But they don't have any part in doing that because that's the risky part, right? So if other people want to take that risk, that's fine with them. We have all the structure to say for sure if it's going to be fun or not, if players are going to engage with it or not. So I think they've done. It's very interesting, the hyper-casual space in a way. They kind of distill fun to one mechanic, and that thing is interesting. I mean, it doesn't touch me all the time, but just structurally or the design implication of that is very interesting.
And I think what's interesting for me is that if you use it as a mechanism to find out the processes, like I say, the mechanic that is fun, and then you think about that as a toolkit to create the next layer. So for me, it's like the core mechanic is one thing, but then the context of that mechanic, or multiple mechanics that allow me to drive the context further, so that I can have the game I want to make around, this is the purpose of the game I'm trying to make. This is the progression within the game that progression paths sometimes. It doesn't even have to necessarily be one path. But the trouble is, as soon as we start splitting into multiple options, multiple mechanics, we're increasing the complexity. And we're making the gaps between each of those mechanics. So the data we can get for each single mechanic is then fuzzier because we're putting several together.
Yeah, you're trying to... You're looking at the forest, but you don't know which tree is a problem or is doing great, actually, because you have multiple trees. But yeah.
But I think it still reduces the risk at the end of the day, because if we're using mechanics that are sufficiently familiar, but we're applying how we use them through our intuition, our insight, our experience, and then validated by further data, I think we can build this stuff in layers.
Yeah, but I think that's what the hyper casual are doing, right? They're finding the core and then they're adding the layers after, because that's what the studios are good at. It's the layers, but finding the core is the hard part, and they're putting that risk outside, and they're not really paying until they know it's been validated. So I don't know how that can translate to.
Well, that's the thing, and I was going to come back with a contrast of when you're in a major AAA game, they're not doing that kind of mechanic. And quite often, they're literally prohibited from telling anybody, and therefore arguably prohibited from actually doing any actual scaled testing because of the marketing constraints presented by the platforms. So in that context, how do you find out that the thing you're making is the right thing?
I don't know, because if you keep it internal, I think there's other pitfalls in the way, right? Because internal gates where there's multiple people reviewing your product, and then some of them are risk averse, and then will try to normalize your product because that way they feel more comfortable, can kind of kill a product. While if you put it out there, you have numbers from the player, you have a player voice that says, this is good, this is really good. Then you're building a community. Forward. Yeah, already. But yeah.
I think the reason I mention this is because I think we are often fraught with risk. And when we look back and we say, I think it was Newzoo data for 24, where around 12% of player time was spent on new games. That's terrifying for people making new games.
We live in this post gold rush of game era where the market has stabilized and the players have stabilized.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing from the young players, they're keeping to one game. Like my nephews, they're playing Brawl Star or Geometry Wars, and they're keeping that one game that they're playing all the time. And they've grown with that. So they're either playing Roblox, Fortnite, but they're keeping to one game, and then they switch to one other game every 5 to 6 years or whatnot. And that's really terrifying for us, because it means that not a lot of games will make it out there. But yeah.
My instinct, though, is I do think that people are a bit more promiscuous with the games they play than we are seeing at the moment. I do think there's a current trend, partly because of the economic context. I think a lot of particularly younger people don't have the disposable income. But we are still seeing a healthy indie scene, despite the fact that the indie scene has no investment. There's less investment probably than I've ever seen, or at least that's my perception of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see the money going into indie projects anymore. And also the cost of acquisition is so high now, and not just because it's harder to find people. I'm not sure it is harder to find people. No, I suppose it is a little bit, but it's more that the way that we target has become fuzzier and more problematic. I won't bore you with my thesis on that. I've talked about that enough on these channels. But I do think we are stuck in this dilemma. And in some ways, I wonder how much of this stuff that the LiveOps teams can leverage. Because if you think about a bigger game that has got an established audience, I think they've still got the same challenge as a new game, but in the context of what's going to keep that player coming back tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, that's in mobile game, that's like the bread and butter, right? It's always been like that. Now, more PC games are doing like game as a service, and now they're thinking about the same things. But for mobile games, it's always been like that. But yeah, while we were talking, I got this thing where I'd like your opinion on this. So we got these kids being used to game as a service, right?
Yeah.
So they're creating that long connection with one game, and then they're moving on. While we, as kids, the games were smaller, right? We were just our habit was churning out games. Yeah. And then maybe the problem with games as a service now is that is ourselves. We're teaching kids to stay in their same game.
Yeah,
So
that
maybe
could be
we're
it. I
shooting
mean,
ourselves in
maybe.
the foot.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I definitely see that. I mean, that is a thing, I'm sure. But I mean, I'm just trying to think about my experience. So I'm thinking about D&D, and I know it's not the same thing. But if you think about the cycles and waves that we've seen in that context, particularly around COVID, where there was explosion of the actual plays. So what I think personally is I think we've always had multi-tracks. I think for the gamer, the deep gamers like me and yourself, we've always probably had a long-term thing we were kept going back to. But we were always experimenting behind the scenes when we could. We never, I think, I mean, obviously, I'm going to go back to the old days where we could get a shareware disc with, Wolfenstein on it or similar, the magazine codes and typing in and always discovering that there was some typo in the code and not quite being good enough to fix it as a coder in my case, but friends of mine were much better at it. But to my mind, it's the same concept, which is those who are deeply gamer want to experiment. Those which are more casual in the actual sense of the word casual, as opposed to what we currently. If you think, I don't know the way we call casual gamers, people who play match 3 or kind of sort of word games and so on and so forth, because they can play in such a hardcore way with a so-called casual genre. When I'm talking about a casual in this context, I'm talking about people who. A game is a thing that they may or may not do occasionally, but it's not how they identify. I identify, you cut me, I bleed game. I mean, that's me. But I know lots of people who won't call themselves gamers, but they all have a game that they play regularly. They don't tend to have games that they dip in and out of. They don't try lots of things. If something has got in their face, they'll try it. My wife is not a gamer. It's kind of the only thing that keeps me sane is having a partner who's not a gamer. And it was recently we saw Tiny Bookshop on at my Xbox. I'm loving it. It's been such a chill out game. I'm really enjoying it. It's the first game in nearly 30 years of marriage. Over 30 years of marriage. Goodness me, I'm so old. That she went, oh, I'd like to play that.
Yeah.
What?
But I played Stardew Valley with my girlfriend, and that was a great experience.
And it's those moments, though, isn't it? It's those things that take those more casual people to make them want to engage, where it's more word of mouth than user acquisition. Yeah. I have another thesis as well, which I'm going to throw at you, and I don't know what you think about this. Do you remember when Pokemon Go was released?
Yes.
Now, that was bigger than the combined downloads of every other game and app at the time. I suspect we've annoyed most of the casual to semi-gamers. I suspect that the pool of potential gamers, people who might want to game, dwarfs the number of people who currently game. And I think that's due to more aggressive tactics. What do you think?
I don't think that's it. From my perspective. I think the offering and the barrier to entry, and then the perception, there's still perception that gaming is not a great thing. I think those three things together, because the Stardew Valley offering, that spoke to my girlfriend really, but she didn't know. She didn't know about it. There's a gap between her and that game, but that experience she really liked. So there's a problem.
And did she play mobile or did she play PC console?
For Stardew, we played on the TV.
On TV, yeah.
So I was streaming my PC on the TV.
But it's interesting because that was available on mobile. From friends of mine worked on that particular mobile port, and but I would love to know what those, because I think this is the thing in my head. The reason why I mentioned this idea that I suspect that there is a much larger pool than we see, and again I might be wrong.
But Pokemon Go was a weird one. Because the people that made it were not game makers. So when it first came out and it had all that, there was not that many game mechanics. It was just the collecting. You could not fight with the Pokemons. You could not do anything with them. It was very dry. So maybe those people came. And so to me, it's not the monetization part that was problematic. It was that there was no game to it yet. It was just
and that's fair, but the huge numbers showed to me the value of that IP, the value of that brand being way more than whether it was a game or not.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that's kind of what the point I'm trying to get to is that maybe there's more. I think what I'm trying to say is we have definitely matured as an industry, no question, and mobile explicitly. And mobile's challenges with the cost of acquisition becoming so daunting, such a barrier to entry for new games, it's ridiculous. And we have a discovery problem, sure. But I don't think there's no hope for mobile game to have growth. And I similarly think that there's still opportunities to be had. But how do we deal with this kind of like this challenge of A, being discovered, B, being engaged, C, retaining, and D, converting? And, I mean, love to know what you kind of think about that kind of challenge.
So you spoke about the indies before. I feel like there's not a lot of money for the indies, but I think that's where there's the most opportunities because of that marketing thing. Because indies get marketing for free. So because streamers will play indies without expecting money because they're just looking for things to stream and things like that. They prefer to get money, but like they must not get always opportunities to stream for money. But yeah, and then if you go cross-platform, you maximize your marketing opportunities and where players can discover your game. And so to me, that's where there's still room for money. Because the AAA, they're doing the movie thing where they're doing sequels, right? And the mobile, it's the people that control the UA because they have a game that's already made. They control the market, the number of users that are on the market. So I think the only portion that's like left where there's a price that's easy or that makes sense to buy a user, if we can put it that way, is the indies or the AAAs that are cross-platform. Because all the rest is just, it costs too much to do either advertising or.
But I do wonder how much of it comes down to what you said earlier about this offering something that stands out. We have still seen mobile content that hasn't had that much marketing go wild. I mean, it's increasingly less common, I know. But it does still happen. But when it happens is when you've taken the risk and you've got something that is observably off kilter in a good way. So I do think that there's. If I'm drowning in match 3 games, I'm drowning in 4X games. I'm being shoved them in my face continuously, particularly with some of the bad practice that's been going on with some of the ad companies lately. It's putting me off playing at all. Because, I won't bore you with my thesis on ex-evangelist for Unity ads telling people why he thinks ads are bad. I know, that's very terrible. What can I say? But the point I'm trying to get to here is, I think you made a really important point, which is the thing for me that indies and AAs are doing, and I agree with you on the cross-platform bit, but the thing that they're doing is they are finding different things. And the ones that the survivors that we get out of that are the ones who've done something where there's a moment of zeitgeist, a moment of like spirit of the age that resonates. And I know Balatro wasn't just a mobile game, it was available all over the place, but that's an example.
I bought it on multiple platforms.
Yeah, I have it on everything. I've just can't help myself. Slay the Spire is another one for me, but then, I happen to love those kind of games. But it's amazing.
About that.
Yeah.
So Vampire Survivor?
Yeah.
Like, it's in the same ballpark of these indies. But now they came out with that other thing, like a Vampire Crawler. Yeah. It's amazing. I'm
glad it is. I have a bit of a bugbear because the person who made that originally essentially went out telling everybody that all publishers are evil after me offering to give them a free just complete free advice on monetization design. And the next thing I saw was everybody involved in publishing is evil, which I took personally. Now, it's probably unfair of me to take personally, but it means that I have a little bit of a struggle when I see people go out, win lots of awards for a game, which I would argue was just a very well put together version of other things that previously existed.
I think there was perfect storm for Vampire Survivor.
But that was the point. Yeah, they got the perfect storm in terms of the timing, and I think what is positive is, like you say, the new game they've come up with is actually very good as well. So I'm not. I know I'm holding a chip on my shoulder, and it's all my fault. So please ignore me. But I still have a bit of a chip on my shoulder about their attitudes. So
I think there's something interesting with that second game. So first, they found fun again. So
yeah,
they tried something different, and they still found fun. So
which is great.
It's
and that's
nice to know that like somebody can hit a home run twice, and there's the production aspect of it. So we talked about ROI at the conference, but for that game they reused the assets and that weird visual style that Vampire Survivor had. That's kind of, you look at that and you're like, it's not pretty, but it's interesting. It's weirdly different than other things that are out there.
It's contextually relevant.
Yeah.
And I think that's massively clever. And like you say, using the same assets in a way that doesn't feel like you're just shoveling, especially in an era of internet, AI slop, to be able to do that and it be authentic, that's good. Yeah, that's a good thing.
So they focused on the fun, not on the assets.
Yeah.
And they were able to reuse a lot of things. So the production cost must have been lower. I think it's a really interesting case study for that one.
No,
not to go in the same space.
I can't disagree on that. Yeah, but maybe that's the point we're trying to say here, is that I think we have a maturing market, but we also have a content market. And the thing about content market is it's subject to taste and subjective analysis, and it evolves. And we need to find the vectors to allow us to evolve to do that. I do think, though, that the LiveOps games can also evolve. They can also continue to sustain by adapting, introducing new elements. Whether it's, the example I always think about is where the Forex games did these fake ads and then realised the fake ads were actually game designs people wanted to play, and they found ways to actually change the way they did the game so that those fake ads were real.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
That's a research. Like we talked about finding fun before, but that's a way to do it, right? You make a fake ad that looks like fun, and then people engage with it and build the
Let's make that then.
Yeah, and I think with AI, right, you can do those sort of things, right? You say, I have this idea of a game in my head. Can you generate a video that shows me what it would look like, and then you use that. You pay for some ad campaign using that video and see if people engage with it. Yeah. And then you say, there could be something there, and then you dig deeper. There are new ways to do that research, I think.
It's a difficult one, that one, because I think that's smart. I know some people who would find that problematic. But for my mind, the point for me would be, I'm happy in principle to use AI tools to generate concepts and ideas and ideation. I recently was playing with Gemini to basically take a concept I've been thinking about for a long time and do effectively a paper prototype. But it's actually an app that I can run as a WebGL experience. Oh my God, I can actually see it play. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I make that thing, which is unlikely, but if I do, I actually know what it's going to be in a way that I couldn't have done had I had to go draw something, paper prototype, hand it over to a coder, then build it. I then review and go, no, that doesn't work. Repeat. Now I can know that, get it to a point where it works, and then hand it over to the coder and the artist to make it look good.
I like that portion of AI where it's like you probably have many areas of expertise, but you also have blind spots. And the fact that it can cover those blind spots to be able to put out the idea that you have in your head into something tangible. I love that part. I don't know why people react so strongly to this.
Well, I think I'll give you an example. I have friends of mine who are voice actors who've had their voices stolen. That's cut and dry for me. That's a no-go. That's unreasonable. I know lots of artists, and actually photographers, who used to do these kind of like close-up shots of objects and stuff like that, and they no longer have a job. And I get that. I have huge sympathy for that. But I also know what it's like when I can sit down with a tool like Lovable and work out what I want a graph to look like, so I can then hand it to my data analyst and to my coder to make happen.
Yeah.
It's a magic.
That that thing you mentioned when you ask data analysts exactly what you want, and they're not giving it to you, and then you found a way to make that bridge easier.
And I accept it's my fault that they're not giving it to me most of the time, because communication is hard. But it's also that I don't know what the problems are. I mean, I'm quite good at. My problem is I know everything about making games, except I can't make them. I can't code, I can't draw, I can barely write, but I know what a game should feel like. That means that actually I'm in this perfect space where actually now I could just load up the AI and do it all myself. But I would probably alienate 90% of the people I work with.
Yeah, but it's really an interesting moment where we kind of have to adapt to that new thing. But But that thing you said about the voice being stolen, I think that's just like AI itself needs to change a bit, need to be the legality of things.
It's the economics models that's the problem, not the technology. It's in context. I don't think there's anything wrong with a person who's got the right voice to have an agreement if his voice is being used to find a mechanism which makes sense. And I don't think we found it yet, but where I can then have an adaptive AI script that can be spoken by them without having to have them in the studio for every change of word. And I think that's the kind of barrier. I don't know where that looks like yet. I think we'll get there. But that's the thing for me, is I think people should have an ownership over their natural qualities. And the one area I think is important is performance. The performance of a person is still night and day, and the nuance between different people approaching different roles in different times, and the way that changes the way we emotionally react to a story, I think that requires an artist to do that personally.
Yeah, I think there's really interesting things with this, right? So for movies, we are okay watching something that is not real people, something that is illustrated. It's not so much about the craft that somebody did the drawings. It's more where the story puts us. But let's say for sports, we watch real people play. It needs to be real people.
Yeah.
It's been years that we could have watched fake hockey match. I'm from Canada, so hockey is my...
Well, but you say this, but horse racing, there are fake horse races being put into gambling shops. But has been doing that for years. I mean, actually, it's not quite. It's not always fake. It's more a case of they'll do a series of horse races, and they randomize which one will be playing, and you're effectively doing a kind of gambling process on that. Now, I'm not an expert in gambling. I did once have to launch a mobile gambling service, but I hated it. I never want to do it again. But I learned so much around customer service, because arguably they're really good at that. So it's not something I want to do, but I think it's interesting that there are things like that had already existed.
But that thing you talked about, there's the gambling aspect to it. When it's just entertainment and you cannot project yourself, I think the sports thing is you can project yourself, right?
That's true. Yeah, and you can have ownership of the team and feel part of it. That parasocial part of it. You're right. That's a very. But we could have
watched like NHL '94 games for years, right? And we don't do that. So I don't think some portion of entertainment will be taken over by AI, but others will not. There's that human connection, that performance portion that you talked about.
But it's interesting how many of the animated shows that we've seen are actually acted. Where they essentially motion capture an actor to perform a lot of those functions. So
and how they pay top actors to do the voice acting.
Exactly.
Because they could have picked anyone. Like, it could have been cheaper to use anyone, but they get more money out of it when people can make a connection with the person that's speaking. Oh, it's that guy. So I think there's something interesting there too. It's going to be interesting because voice is easy to do in AI, but you lose that connection portion.
You do, and maybe this is the thing, is that we talked earlier about like what are the cores of monetization, finding the fun being the key thing, and that being about engagement, retention, and revenue. But I do think there's something, if, to be a terrible seguer, I'm going to bring us back, because if you think about it, what drove those things is the IP, the identity, the branding, and actually part of what keeps us in a game is the IP, the branding, but also that parasocial relationship we have with the IP. So, when we're in a Fortnite, we play Fortnite because it means something. Just look at the people who play COD versus PUBG. There's a sense of tribalism around those players. And I think that tribalism is part of that social capital, that social value that I was talking about when I talk about anticipation, fear of missing out, and social capital. It's like, it's an integral part of what makes us want to keep playing. My friends are going to be there. I identify as a PUBG player, for example.
The game resonates with you, and then there's other people that resonate, and then I like those people. They're like me. I found my tribe. I found my people.
Found my tribe, yeah. I think that it's, again, I don't know about how you think about it, but for me, I think there's a lot of self-determination theory, psychology that goes into how we think about game design. But I think we also have to think about social identity theory as well. And the way that we kind of motivate people, I think, can't be separated entirely from the relatedness of us and the game and us and other people who play the game.
Yeah.
So with all of this, we've talked about a whole sweeping area. I love talking about this area. And, I came in thinking we were going to talk more about monetization design, and we've ended up covering a whole bunch of things. But that's the joy of and this is the whole point of what we do in design. We're thinking about what's happening in the market, how players come into our games. We're thinking about how people engage, retain, and how we create delight for them to such an extent that they love it so much they want to buy something. In fact, that they anticipate the value of the things they could buy. With all of that, what are the kind of core things you think anyone who wants to get into this space in terms of design, or particularly economy design, what are the kind of hit traps that they should be aware of?
So in the talk I gave, the presentation I gave in Austin, one of my key things is that people usually focus too much on selling currencies themselves. There's not a lot of education on game economy. Well, you just wrote a book, but there was not that many things where you could learn about this, right? And then the one thing that was there for all the time of free-to-play, and then still every game has it, is selling art currency, right?
Yeah.
I think people have expanded on that, but people that have had more experience with it. But like, to focus on that, I think it is a bad choice, just because it's not a sexy thing, right?
No one cares. What?
No one.
There is no emotional benefit to a coin.
Yes.
The emotional benefit is what I can spend the coins on. And
then the parallel I would do to Apple, when Apple are selling you something, they're selling you a lifestyle, right? They're not selling you the object. They're selling you what's your life going to be, the other people that are like you. But you cannot do that with a currency. So I think people focus too much on that, while they should be focusing on selling things that connects with the user and that they can sell a fantasy about. So that's usually my go-to thing, because I go to many of the different companies, and they tell, we didn't sell that many currency, and then you shouldn't be focusing on that. You should be selling characters.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. That's
I totally buy that. And again, it was one of those things we actually learned back in the day with Unity ads, weirdly, is you'd think that a rewarded ad, so an opt-in choice to watch an ad, is surprisingly fickle based on the benefit we get from watching the ad. And when people were giving away coins, it was much less engaging. When we had people, in fact, not just engaging in terms of would they click on the ad at all, but engaging in the sense of would they then go on to install the game. And remember that most people who are using rewarded ads in a game to get revenue only get paid if an install happens. So, but what if you give something they want, that they care about, that makes it exciting? And for me, this can include things like trying out a new weapon for 3 turns. Seems trivial, but it's exciting. They were more likely to to actually click on the install button. So
That makes total sense. You're saying, like I was saying, you're not giving or selling, because ads is basically a microtransaction. Yeah, you're selling something that means something to the player, or like can project himself, or he can see what his experience is, how it's going to be different after doing that.
I think
Currency
that's
is not
so key.
transformative.
Yeah. I think if even in the currency design, I find that a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen this, but I find that a lot of people don't really think about why. And, it's what does the currency give you? How does the anticipation, oh, I've got enough currency. The weird thing was, back in the day, long, long time ago, I remember seeing games where people wouldn't spend the currency. So to earn all this soft currency. But it turned out that it was the only way they could show off how effective they had been in the game. There was no high score table, there's no leveling in this particular game that I was reviewing. And people were using how much currency they'd earned as a way of showing off. So it was a disincentive to use it. Yeah.
So that's the only fantasy I can see related to a currency is either being rich, or in that situation is kind of status, which is similar-ish. But like, they want to show off they're rich. They're already rich because they're going to be spending that to get the currency, to get that number to be up. So yes, they want it. So it touches so little of the portion of player base that you should not focus on that. But yeah, it's interesting.
So if there's one thing from this conversation like people to take away from it, what would that be?
Take risk and look for fun. Make something different.
I like that, make something different, particularly because I think we are at risk of stagnating in the mobile space because of the risk factors being so high. I think the ability, reminding ourselves we need to be seen as something fresh. It's going to make our life a lot easier to engage, to feel like you connect to the game, to find an audience. I think there's so much value in that. Dominic, thank you so much for that. If people wanted to find out more about yourself or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn and just by my name, and then send me a message.
And we'll include that in the show notes. So Dominic, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. This has been your LiveOps Lounge. We've discussed everything to do with design, monetization, flow, and I think particularly, I love the fact that we've got down to the kind of value, the way that we feel and engage with games, and why that engagement matters in order to drive retention, to drive revenue. And it's not just about the free-to-play games, but it's doubly so important for those free-to-play mobile experiences because of the competitive and commercially tricky time we're in. Dominic, thank you again so much for that, and we'll be back again next time when we talk more about the LiveOps experience. Welcome back to the LiveOps Lounge then. Goodbye.
Cheers.